My name is Ellen Graham, formerly Ellen Carter. My folks were missionaries over in India, where I was born. I have a twin sister. I have an older sister and a younger brother. But when we were born, Mother had an Indian doctor, and he came there to be with her. And all he could hear was one heartbeat. And so he told Mother, "You'll have a big baby. That's what you're going to have." So Mother was settled with that. Okay. Mother's a nurse, and she made up the bed next to her to put her child on. I came first, and I was a big baby, but not so big. Anyway, Mother put me on the side of the bed next to her bed. And then the doctor looked at Mother and says, "There's still a big bunch in there." I said, "I don't know what it is." And then he listened again. He couldn't feel any heartbeat. So pretty soon he says, "We'll wait till the afterbirth comes out, then we'll see what happens." Well, the afterbirth did come out, but my sister's head showed up. And the doctor had to tell Mother, says, "You have another baby." And it happened to be another girl. And the boys at the school where my dad was teaching didn't like it, because boys are always wanted, girls are not. And says, "You have one older girl and now you have two baby girls." They thought he was cursed by God, that he wouldn't have any more. And so Mother said, "No, as long as they're healthy, we don't mind, we'll take them." And then a year and a half later, my brother was born. Then they were happy. That's just one little story. I'd like to tell you the story about my student nurses. They have to have English background. And I had a little touch of Urdu. I knew a little bit. They didn't know how much I knew. But when I went back, I went up to Peshawar, which was north of Karachi, to have a briefer teaching me Urdu so I can understand it a little bit more. Because all I learned in school, 4 years, with an Urdu teacher, was the alphabet and to count, and that's about it. He knew each time he'd have new students that didn't know Urdu, so he'd start over to the alphabet. So when I went to Peshawar, it was quite interesting. This Munshi, that's what they call the Urdu teacher, he came, he sat on one side of the table, and I was on the other side of the table. It was in Pastor Brown's study. And so he said, "Oh, we'll start out with the alphabet." So he started to kind of draw on a piece of paper. I said, "Yeah, Aleph, Be, Pe, Te, Se." And he looked at me. He says, "I thought you were a new student." I said, "I am. I'm new here on my own, but I was back in India. I learned a little bit." But I said, "I don't know much about it. I just know how to count, and I know how to do that." Say the alphabet. So then he went on and he taught me how to join them together and read sentences, so I was able to do a little bit more. Then I came back to Karachi to start my school. So we got the girls in. And I was just newly graduated myself in the States. So I said, well, it should be easy, just tell them what I have. So we got some books together and I started to teach school. I taught them how to clean a patient's room so that it's all clean and sparkling, no germs around. And then I had to teach them how to make the beds. And then it was for bathing the patient in bed. So each student had to bathe each other in bed to get the use of what to do. And then I said, well, all right, we know how to bathe a patient in bed. Now we're going up to the ward. And there was a ward of 12 ladies all together in the ward. And I had 9 students, so I divided them up. And I said, you take some bed number 1, you take number 2, and so forth, and then give them a bed bath. So I said, I'll be back, see how you're doing. I said, you know how to do it? You did to each other in the school. So I came back in, and here was one of my students, had sat the patient in the chair beside her bed, and she took the basin of water, and she was bathing the bed. And I said, what are you doing? I'm doing what you told me, sister, because they call us sisters. Are you doing what I've told you? I said, I didn't tell you to bathe the bed. I said, bathe the patient in bed. Oh, now it dawned on her. But that's the way English mixed up with theirs. She was taking it word for word, because I said, bed bath. But we always refer to that in student nursing. We always say bed bath for this and bed bath for that, and they can't get out. But fortunately, this was a medical thing. They didn't have any surgery, so it was all right for her to sit in the chair. But it was things like that's interesting around them. I said graduation time, when they finished, then they had to go for state boards. But it was the Sin Nursing Council for state boards. They'd already graduated. And so I took them down to get their boards. It was a funny thing. First, they scheduled it for Saturday. And we don't want to go on Saturday. So I told them to go ahead and we will try to work it out. I said, is there any way we can take the class maybe after sundown Saturday? Well, they didn't know about that, back and forth. Finally, they arranged it. God, we'd been praying for it. God allowed them to come and take the test. So they took the test. After they took the test, then the nurse came to me, because I was the instructor, and says, you're teaching them far too much. I said, I'm just teaching what I learned as a nurse. I said, I don't see it too much. I said, if I was a patient, I would want them to know what I learned. And so that was what was so funny. I said, but over and again, I have to be careful of how I worded things, because we're not that up on English. But by the time they got through, but I decided God was with me in the end, because when they came to America, some of them, and some of them are working in Loma Linda right now. And so I said, I must have made good nurses there, because they're still working here. When I was born over there, I told you a little bit about my birth. Mother didn't know there was having twins. And so I was born and grew up. In South India, it wasn't too bad. They were in Tamil section, and we used to run around and play around. And my brother and I used to like to play together. I was a tom girl. I ought to do what he did. So one day I climbed up in a tree. He was climbing trees. I said, I can do it too. I climbed up in the tree, and there was a branch that was broken. And I didn't realize it was just, well, it was just kind of split a little bit. But I stepped on it, and I went down, and it went into my leg. We were at the hill station at that time, and there was a doctor available, so he came and doctored me up. But I never forgot it. I still don't have the scar, but it was something I never realized, that when you climb a tree, you might get hurt. So my mother said, you can't go up on the trees anymore. That's for boys, and you're not a boy. I said, oh, Mother, I love to do those things. But my brother and I used to play around a lot. But that's just some of the interesting things. Then when I finished in South India, we came back to the States. I was about 6 years old then, 7. And I went to my cousin's school. They were going to school at that time, first grade. So I went there, and we'd been in India school, and it was so much different. There in India, we were very strict. If a teacher asked you something, you had to, whether you knew the answer or not, you had to stand up. Respect the teacher. And these students, they were half laying down and they'd answer it, and they're half doing this, and I just looked, I was shocked at the way they were teaching the students. But I didn't say a word until I got home. Then I told Mother all about it. She says, well, America is a little different than overseas. But you were right, they should respect their teachers more. But I never got over it. I think my cousins didn't have a good education because they didn't respect their teachers. When I was in India as a child, in fact, we were just still in a pram. Mother used to carry us around, and we used to go by train from station to station. And one place we call it the monkey town, because there were monkeys everywhere. And we had to watch it, because if you had food in your hand, they're happy to grab it right out of your hand, because they want the food. And so we were both babies, sound asleep. Eloise on one side, I was the other side in this pram. And Mother had covered us with a tiny cloth just to kind of keep the weather out and anything else. And then she was looking out the window at the station at the people going by on the platform. And all of a sudden she looked and she saw the top thing going out the window. And she grabbed onto it, and the monkey pulled on it for a while. She finally got it down, and she shut the window so they can't do it anymore. But we didn't wake up. It was just took away from us. But we just loved to go through that monkey town whenever we went there, because we could see monkeys all over. And my brother used to say, here, kid, come, take it. Mother said, don't do that, they might grab your arm. But we were interested in doing that. Then other things in India, of course, we went to school in a Vincent Hill school, is where all European children used to go. Some from Burma, some from India, some from Pakistan, all went up there. So when we were school age, we went up there. Leaving India, coming back to the United States, we were there for when we were 6 years old, but we didn't remember much of it. But to see the cars and all, one thing I was scared to death of was telephones. My uncle, he was always joking with us, and he wanted to speak to each one of us children, and he called up where we were with my aunts. And he called us all up, and Mother'd call us one by one to talk to my uncle. And he said to me, how are you? Do you have any boyfriends over there? And I said, boyfriends? What do you mean by boyfriends? I was only about 13. I didn't know much about boyfriends. And so he teased me a lot, but I was scared to death. I hardly wanted to talk. And that's about all I was doing. And he said, talk up, I like to hear your voice. Talk, tell me something. Mother says, talk, that's not going to bite you. But I was scared of them. And I took quite a while before I got used to the telephone. Nowadays, it's so everybody has one, they just walking around. Another thing different, coming from a foreign country into the United States. You see a lot more traveling, cars and buses and that. You don't see the street cars, the push cars that going along the streets. It's just that. And then I said the eating is so different. We go here, we eat Norman, what we know is American food, but we weren't used to it. Mother had to almost punish us to eat some asparagus because they don't have it over there. Now I like asparagus. Another thing was avocado. I didn't know avocado until I got started here. And but my uncle again, he was teasing us. He came, picked us up, took us for a ride around, and he was teasing us all the time, mainly about boyfriends, girlfriends with my brother. And finally he said to us, we'll go down and eat something. So he took us to a drive-in, I don't know what time, but they had ice cream there. And so he said, what do you want? You want some ice cream? Well, we don't know what that was. And I was a little leery. I never had meat in my life, so I didn't want anything with meat. And I knew he wasn't a good Adventist. He probably ate all kinds of things. So he said ice cream, and I said, that sounded pretty good there, but I didn't know what too much. Finally he said, how about a milkshake? Yeah, that might be good. And then in the long run we said, no milkshake, because that might have some meat in it. We kids were so twisted around what to do. After years, when that passed, I went to my uncle later and I said, you treated us out of something because you knew that we liked it, but you wouldn't let us have it because we said no. He said, well, I just did your wishes. It's not my fault. Well, Mother taught us the first 2 or 3 grades in India. So when we came back, we were in the 2nd grade. And Sonoma Valley was one place we were there when we were kids. I don't remember too much about it, except it was different. Because when we'd stand up like little puppets, the teacher said, no, you can sit down. No, you can sit down. But we were trying to show respect, and that was what we were taught. But we got along pretty good that way. And then from there, we went to La Sierra. My folks found a place there and stayed in La Sierra. And I went to the academy there. I guess I finished grade school in Walla Walla, I guess is when I finished the grade school. Then I went to La Sierra and we went to the academy. My twin sister, she stayed in Auburn Academy up in Oregon. Mainly because that time of year, they were very hard getting secretaries, and she loved to be a secretary because she took shorthand and all that, and I wasn't interested in that. I was interested in playing with my brother, you know. She loved books. So she stayed up there, and I came down to La Sierra. Then later she joined me. Now we're twins, but we don't look alike. We're fraternal twins. Oh, they could sisters, yeah, we might look like sisters, but not like twins. And so when she came, she joined a group on a bus tour. They were going to have an outing for the juniors. So she joined us, and I was talking to different girls groups around. Finally said, "Have you met that new girl?" And I said, "Yeah, I met her." And I said, "I knew her a long time ago." "And you did?" And then I finally told him, I said, "She's my twin sister." What? They couldn't believe it. I had a twin. And so I said, "Yeah, that's my twin sister." And it was so much fun. We laugh about even now, today. I'll come along this run, she'll join me or something. And I said, "Have you met her before?" "Oh yeah, she's so-and-so." I said, "Well, she's my twin sister." And they still don't believe me. So one time I told the girls, I said, "She's my twin. You go over there. She's over there. I'm over here. I'll stay here. You go and ask her if she isn't my twin and see if I'm telling you the truth." And so they did. They went over there and asked her, and she said, "Sure, she's my twin." We grew up together. And when she came here, I came here to Yountville first. Then my twin sister she helped me move here. She saw how nice it was. She decided she was going to go pack up and move. So she reserved a room for it, and she came. So when she came, I kept telling them, "You know that new girl? You know that new girl?" "Well, I've seen her, yeah." I said, "She happened to be my twin sister." "Ah, you're believing. You're bluffing. You're bluffing." I said, "No, I'm not. She is my twin sister." And so they'd go up and ask her, and, "Oh, yeah, that's my twin sister." So we still have a lot of fun. Well, when I came back from India, we settled around, well, it was Auburn for a while, then came down to La Sierra. But while I was in India, my mother was school nurse, and I'd see the kids come to her feeling bad and all, and mother'd help them, and they'd go away laughing and playing around. And I thought, that's what I'd like to do, help people get well. And so that was my start. God gave me that impression then. So when I went to La Sierra, it wasn't too long before I found out they have nursing, to be nursing. I take pre-nursing, so I joined La Sierra College and took pre-nursing. After pre-nursing, I went to Glendale Hospital and took my nurse's course. And after I finished my nurse's course, I said, "Well, I'm a nurse now, but maybe they want me somewhere that I can teach. I better go to Walla Walla." So I went to Walla Walla and joined the last year to get my BS in nursing education. After I got that, I came back to, my folks had moved to Indiana at that time. And so I came and stayed with them for a while. And then I got a long kind of a letter from the General Conference wanting to know if I would like to go to Karachi. So I looked at that, I said, "Say, Mother, God's prepared me to go teach." They're starting a school of nursing in Karachi. And so I said, "I'm going to go." She said, "Well, we hate to see you go that distance, but we know you have the interest, so you better go." And so I packed up, got all regulations, what they wanted me to go, and got on the ship at San Francisco and went sailing off to India, to Pakistan rather, and got off at Karachi. And then when I got there, they said, "We haven't started school of nursing, we've just got a few people that are interested coming to school, but we know you need to brush up on your Urdu." So they sent me to Peshawar, and that's what I've told you a bit about Peshawar. After I got brushed up on the Urdu in Peshawar, then I came back to Karachi and got organized and teaching. I had 9 students to start with, and that was a lot of fun. Mainly because they didn't know too much English. They had English background, but they had English books to study. And the SIN Nurses Council said, because you're starting a school of nursing, you have to have doctor's lecture, at least so many lectures a year. So I said, well, doctors don't know too much about nursing. They always go such big words. I said, I don't know whether the kids could take it or not. But I went to the doctor after doctor. I said, could you give a lecture to the girls on such and such a subject? And they said, sure, be glad to. And so they'd come in, and the girls were very polite. They took their pencils out, and they would write up as if they were taking notes and everything else. And they'd look at the teacher and look at the doctor, and he was talking all about it, and he even some of them pictures he showed them, and took it all in. After he left, they crowded around me. Sister, will you please tell us what he said? So I had a lecture all over again. Because I had a way of knowing around their language so that I could get to them. Toward the end, when they were senior years, they were able to do without. But that first year or so, I had the time with the doctors. I said, doctors, talk in small English. I said, don't bring your big words. I said, they don't know all those big words. I said, if you want a big word, then explain what it is. But they had a hard time doing it all. In studying of the Bible, Jesus did more healing than preaching. He did that because that's what people needed. And when my student nurses came to the School of Nursing, I tried to impress upon them that we are doing like Jesus did. We're learning how we can heal. We can't do as much as he gets, but we can do as much as we can to ease suffering. And then tell them about God. Now we had, in our first group of 9 students, 2 Muslim girls, had never had Christianity. But they had English background and they wanted to become nurses, which is unusual, because the Muslim character, what they think of nurses is as a prostitute. And they've got that name as nursing. And how these girls could come in and take nursing with their parents and allowing them to do so was really amazing to me. But I felt it was God impressed. Now, as far as I know, neither one of them accepted Jesus Christ, but they accepted Jesus as a healer. And they went along doing just like what we said in our schools, because we had Bible studies as well as the rest, all together. And we had prayer every morning when we began. So they were interested to know what we believed in and they learned a lot, but they never really surrendered. I don't think their parents would allow them to come in that way. But I was amazed. They're not supposed to take off their shalwar, which is their pants. They're not supposed to take off other things, but we had uniforms if they wanted to wear them, going on the floor particularly. And I said, if you aren't allowed to take off your pants or trousers, then I said you can have the shirt as a shalwar gun over them so that you can still work as a nurse. I said, you'll look like nurses, and then you'll have your cap after a while, and I would explain. And I said, any questions you ask, I'll be glad to answer it. So we got into quite this was a family affair as well as a student-teacher affair. And so I loved them, they loved me back. And they became good nurses, because I said, I can't see how they came over to the States and still can learn as nurses. But I always laughed at the Sin Nurses Council. They said, you're teaching them too much. It's just too much. We've got to let them be alone. And I said, no. I said, if you are a patient, you would want the nurse to know as much as these girls know. And I said, I'm sorry if your students from the other hospitals are not taught that much. I'm sorry, because they're missing out on a lot of what they should know. Their brains can take it, they can understand it, and you need to teach it. But maybe later on you will be able to. They didn't tell me what subject that I was teaching too much of. But I didn't care, I taught the same thing.
Way to be.
I spent 11 years teaching students there in Karachi. And then at about that time, there was a patient came to Karachi that was an American, and she broke her hip in Cairo. And the next stop was Karachi, and they said there's a hospital in Karachi. So she came over to the hospital. The doctors didn't have any orthopedic surgeon to do anything about her hip. And so he said, what we should do is to put a cast on you and fly you back to America and let them take care of you, because we can't take care of you here. And so they said, okay. And then they needed a nurse to fly with them. So I was in line to fly, and my students were taken care of, so I flew with her to the States. When I was in the States, I met a few of the girls around, and one of my student nurses met me, and she says, you know, there was a lovely man here. He is in charge of the single adults You might have heard of it in Washington, D.C. area. And he's so lovely, and he's not married, and we told him to write to you. Well, when I got back to the States, back to my school again, here came letters from him. And the first letter I remember I opened, it says, I've never written to a young man that I've never met, a young woman that I've never met. And I said to myself, I said, no, I haven't written to one I've never met either. So we began writing. And about the time I came with my patient to Boston, I was writing quite regular to him, so I called back to him, and I swear it's the nearest place I can come to meet you. And so he said, well, you're coming this way? And I think it was Phoenix. No, it wasn't Phoenix. It was, I can't remember. Anyway, one town that I flew then down to that place, and he met me, and then he took me to see his mother. And so I came back to meet my ship, but I said, I don't have any way unless I pay by bus. And he says, no, he says, I'm your bus, I'm going to take you. So he took me back, clear up to the boat, and wished me good luck. We rode a little bit back, but I decided if I didn't come back to the States, I would miss a chance of marrying him, because I knew he was feeling me out, seeing whether I was interested or not. So I told the people there, I said, can you get a replacement for me teaching at school, and I'll go back there and get married. And that's what I did. So I went back and got married and spent some time with him until, I was with him about 22 years, and then he was in an automobile accident and got killed. It was a shock, but it was one of those things. God says, when your husband goes, he says, I'll be your husband. And so he's taken care of me since then. I'll never forget one time. This is another story. One time I was taking my mother from I had a health food store there also where we lived. And I was taking my mother from the health food store to our home to live. Driving along the highway, I was going at a regular speed, but this truck behind me was coming faster than I liked. And I needed to go 3 miles this way and then turn over and go 2 miles into another direction. So I got to the place to turn, and I had my signal going for him to slow up to let me turn. But I couldn't even wheel my wheel. It wouldn't even turn. It was just as hard as a rock. And then Mother says, what's the matter? I said, this wheel won't turn. And just then, shh, the bus drove right by me. So I know the angel was holding that wheel. And I tell kids when I tell a story, I said, if you don't think an angel is strong, you ought to have known that you couldn't have budged that wheel. So one little boy says, yeah. I said, you couldn't have budged it, because God was stronger than me. And he protected me because he wanted me to do some other work for him. So after the thing went by, then I went home. So I got home, my husband was there. This was before he got killed. And I asked him, I said, would you check the back, see if my signals are working? And he went back there and he tried both of them. He said, they're both working on both sides, what's the matter? Then I told him the story. And he said, let's go inside and thank the Lord for saving your life. So that's what we did. So those are some of the interesting stories. When I think over my whole life and see what God has done, and even as a child, he saved me from the monkeys from taking care of me. By pulling that sheet in, Mother took care of him. And he has helped me in so many different ways. In teaching, if I didn't know something and God wanted me to do it, he always helped me find the answer. So I always was able to teach what I wanted to teach. Even when they said I taught too much, I didn't know. I still taught it because I felt God was wanting me to do it. God led me in other ways around. And who knows how many times he's saved me. Pakistan has routed people, not as much as sometimes here in the States, but there's people that have been kidnapped, especially white women. And as a child, I was almost kidnapped with one. But I should tell you that story too. But anyway, God has led me through so many different things. I'll tell you just briefly that one story. when I was a child, I think I was about 8 or 10 years old. Mother, I had done something wrong. I don't remember at this point what wrong I had done. But Mother says, when Daddy comes home, you're going to get a spanking. Well, I don't mind Mother's spanking, but I didn't like Daddy's. He was really too hard on me. And so I said to myself, well, he's not going to be gone for a while. I'll just go hide in the closet. So I knew where Mother kept the dirty clothes, and she had a whole barrel or something of cloth to make new clothes on us. And so I went back in there in the dark and climbed up on one of the dirty clothes things and went sound asleep. It was hot. I was sweaty. But I didn't want that spanking, and I was going to keep away from it as far as I could. Mother looked around for me. She couldn't find me. She asked my sisters and brother if they'd seen me. No, they hadn't seen me for a while. They didn't know where I was. And she thought that she got outside. They didn't know whether I'd gone outside or not. And she looked around, couldn't find me. And I know in her mind she must have thought I was stolen. Somebody had come and taken me away, because I had just dropped out of sight completely. So I slept there for a while, and when Daddy came home, Mother told Daddy all about it. And so they got us together. I, of course, was still sleeping. And they prayed about it in worship. And they said, we don't know where she is, but God, you know where she is. And about that time, Mother said, we heard a wail. And I woke up, it was dark, and I was sweaty and hot. And well, the only thing I could do was call. And I yelled out, and I started crying. Mother said that was a sound of music to her ears. So she quickly came, rescued me out of there and back. And she said, what you doing back in here? And I says, hiding. I didn't tell her from what, but I never got my spanking. I think that taught Mother a lesson not to threaten me with anything, because I'm out to do something. But I never did yet. My name is Ellen Graham, and I am so thankful to God for His wonderful work in leading me and guiding me and protecting me all the years of my life in India, teaching, and even back here in the States. I give Him all the credit.